can see that relative to the third generation, Borjas is saying that immigrants are doing worse and worse with each generation. In 1940, the first generation wage advantage was about 6%. In 1970, it was about 1%. And in 2000, it's a negative 20%. So the claim is that there's a huge drop-off. Now, these are very different populations that we're talking about. Immigrants in 1940, we're talking about these people who came pre and post 1924, they were European immigrants. By 1970, we're talking about a very small population of immigrants who got here through DP Acts and stuff, things like that, which we'll talk about later. But in 2000, we're talking about much more Asian and Latin American migration, which again we will get to shortly. But the picture of these immigrants, the population is changing dramatically, and according to this table, the immigrants are getting worse and worse, and that makes the second generation look better relative to the third generation in 1940. If I had a table here, I know this would be much clearer. But rather than continue to beat this dead horse, let me say that for our purposes, the immigrant quality debate runs in the opposite direction, because our story is that second generation women are more likely to have illegitimate children than our first generation. And if we think, unlike wages, unwed parenthood is bad, then what we're saying is that the immigrant generation is getting better, right? Because the second generation, if the immigrant quality story holds for children out of marriage, then it works backwards. Say, if you want to tell the story, you have to say that at least in terms of unwed parenthood, immigrants are getting better, not worse. I don't think that story is one you can tell from your data because we have only cross-sectional data. But I wanted to bring it up because, first, it's very interesting because this idea that the second generation has a big wage advantage over the first and the third generation is an important idea out there. And it may be less true in view of Borjas' work, but also because we are working with cross-sectional data. So we must be aware that we're not comparing parent to children exactly. We're comparing first generation, second generation. Okay. Regression to the mean is happily an easy enough idea that I could probably do it. Not a good day, right? That we may even be able to, I may be able to draw this slide. Again, it is in the Borjas lecture, the Borjas article, and this is figure 1. That's labeled social mobility between first generation 1970 and second generation 2000. And there's a line here, and there are lots of dots, and these dots all represent countries. And so some of these countries are, let's see, India is up here, Mexico is one of these. All right. And what he's comparing here is, this is first generation, and this is second generation, and these are wage differentials, right? So the 0 point, which no group occupies, is one where the wage differential of the first generation is 0, wage differential from the typical third generation worker. In other words, they're not high earners, they're not low earners. The immigrant generation is the same, and the second generation is both the same as the first generation and the same as the third generation. Right? So it's a typical third generation worker. That's the idea. Right? No country, no immigrant group fits that description. They're instead arrayed along this line, which has a significance we'll talk about shortly. But if we look, for example, at the Mexican group, which is one of the dots right down, not the lowest dot. The lowest dot he labels as Dominican Republic. But the Mexican dot is something about what? Maybe it's negative 35, something 0.35. And that one is probably, I think 0.15, right? Negative 0.1. Right. So this dot is telling us that Mexican immigrants earn about 35% less than typical third-generation U.S. workers, whereas second-generation Mexican Americans earn about 15% less. Right? Okay, do you follow that? That means? Right. If there were no regression to the mean, there would be no relationship between what first-generation workers earn and what second-generation workers earn. If that were the case, the regression line through these dots, the best-fitting line through these dots, would be horizontal. Right? But it is not. In fact, it runs here at about a slope of 0.5. Right? And the interpretation that Borjas assigns to this is that approximately half of the advantage or disadvantage of the immigrant generation accrues to the second generation as well. Right? So in the Mexican case, that's pretty close. We're looking at a 35% disadvantage in the immigrant generation. That translates into about a 15% disadvantage to the children of immigrants. Right? So this is the transmission of disadvantage in that case. In the case of Indians, it's a transmission of advantage, but similarly not a complete translation, not a complete transfer. Indians in the first generation are at a wage advantage of something like 35%, but second generation Indians are only at an advantage of about 10%. Right? So in the case of India, is exactly the opposite of Mexico, but it's the same idea. This is a regression to the mean, the idea that unusual things are unusual. And so whatever happens, if Indian parents are unusual in earning a lot, their children may still earn a lot, but not as much as the parents. And similarly, if Mexican parents are unusual in earning very little, their children may still earn less, but not as much less. That's the concept of regression to the mean. And Borjas uses it to also explain part of intergenerational transfer of advantage. Let's skip a few slides that you can't see anyway. And the main, Borjas takes this number, this 0.5, and compares it to other studies, which compare parents and children, and find that the correlation is more like in the range of 0.2 or 0.4. Right? So that is studies like this, but instead of using groups and averages, use individuals. And there are some sociologists have done this, have collected wage data on parents and sons, or fathers and sons, or mothers and daughters, and they've done the same kind of analysis for individuals, looking for the degree to which success in the labor market is transmitted. Right? So you can imagine these dots representing individuals instead of countries. And in those kinds of studies, the slope is less, actually less. They're usually 0.2 or 0.4. So this Borjas uses as an entree to the idea of that there's something more to it. That ethnicity also transmits something. It's not just a parent-child story going on here. That when you have an ethnic neighborhood, is what he's about to say, you see that the transmission rates are higher than you'd expect from individuals, and that's what brings us to the story of ethnic capital. And in rough terms, Borjas claims on page 66 that about half of the persistence of relative wage difference of different ethnic groups seems to be attributed to ethnic capital. Okay, so in other words, half of this story you can tell because we'd be looking at parents and children, and there's some natural transmission of abilities and talents from parents to children. But the unexplained half, ethnic capital. So what's ethnic capital? Well, the simple ethnic capital is a lot like ethnic enclaves. It's about the ethnic environment. And let me just read a short piece from the paper. I think we'll say it faster than I can. Some have argued that a person's ethnic background in and of itself may affect social mobility. In particular, the skills of the next generation depend not only on what parents do, but also on, quote, ethnic capital, or on the characteristics of the ethnic environment where the children are raised. A highly advantaged ethnic environment, one where most parents are college graduates, for example, imbues children with valuable characteristics that enhance their ethnic environment. That enhance their socioeconomic achievement later in life. In contrast, disadvantaged ethnic environment, those where most parents may be high school dropouts or welfare recipients, imbue children with characteristics that may impede future socioeconomic development. In effect, the ethnic environment is like glue in the process of social mobility, ensuring that average characteristics of the ethnic group do not change much from generation to generation. So, is anyone offended by that? Does anyone find that alarming or curious or interesting? Oh, good. Well, there are some reasons to be a little bit unsure about this. The idea, let's try to kind of state it again in simple form, is that you grow up in a neighborhood where everybody goes to college, you probably go to college. If you don't, you grow up in a neighborhood where people don't go to college, you probably don't. Are those ethnic? Is that an ethnic characteristic, going to college? Kevin?
I don't really think that specifically neighborhood has ethnic, is specifically an ethnic preference, but if you consider these enclaves they're talking about, that if a lot of cultures with the same ethnic background live together or in the same neighborhoods, then I see how they can tie together on a general basis.
So you're saying it's not an ethnic quality, but it's a neighborhood. It could be a neighborhood quality. And so if ethnicity simply overlays neighborhood, then it's one and the same. Is that essentially what you're saying? Okay. Yeah, and I think it's kind of reasonable that segregation might lead to this. And Borjas, you've read it. He also mentions that there are differences that in Mexican neighborhoods and Pico Union, just there's less cohesion than in Koreatown. Koreans and Mexicans are the big groups that he tends to compare. But in that slide that you didn't see earlier, this one, there are groups like Great Britain and Belgium. I don't know if there are any Belgian neighborhoods. I mean, there might be, but I haven't noticed any. So some of that's it may be a little bit overblown. He does this for grandparents too, and claims there's a correlation. Grandparents, that leads to other stories. But what I'm concerned about, what I think is worth keeping in mind when we see arguments like this, is not that it's not that's wrong. That obviously environment has an effect. That's certainly reasonable to think that environment would have an effect on whether you go to college or not. And of course, going to college is a good thing. But this line, that ethnic environment is like glue in the process of social mobility, ensuring that the average characteristics of the ethnic group do not change much from generation to generation. We've turned environment into almost something hereditary, because we're saying that environment somehow makes sure that one generation is just like the next. So you remember that the scientific racists, and I'm very reluctant, I don't mean to compare Borjas to scientific racists, that's not quite fair, but they made this big change from the Enlightenment. They said it's all inborn characteristics that matter, it's not environment. In a way, these kinds of arguments about ethnic capital and about culture, when we argue in addition that culture is transmitted like this, there's not much difference. You call it culture, but it can lead you to the same sorts of conclusions that those groups will never change, or that people in those groups are just the way they are. And it's actually contradicts the idea that environment has an effect. So I think we want to be on the lookout for those kinds of arguments. I don't think that's what Borjas intends us to take away. But nonetheless, it's worth worrying about. The last thing I wanted to mention, and we won't get through today, is the segmented assimilation idea. That was the fourth one. And the segmented assimilation is the idea that's in the New York Times piece. It's most strongly associated. I think the term comes from a piece by Portis and Rumbo, sorry, for sociologists. Portis is at UC Irvine. And what they are saying is that the children of middle-class immigrants will assimilate upwardly, and they will do it fast. It will work great. They will have advantages of their parental resources. They'll have advantages. They'll take education, and there's nothing to worry about. But the children of low-skilled immigrants, and that is especially those of the so-called visible minorities, are at high risk, and their situation is much more complicated. And they will have the aspirations of U.S.-born. They'll watch TV. They'll want stuff. Yet their parents will be employed at lousy jobs. Right? And there's a disconnect there. What Portis and Rambo contend then is they will take on an adversarial culture, or oppositional culture. So again, quotes. And that culture is what they get from living in neighborhoods occupied by other people with adversarial cultures, by which we mean, again, that underclass. Right? So you can tell that, again, it's very consistent with the story of in the New York Times piece. But the question here is the people who criticize this idea that, all right, I better stop. We got other things. I think we're out of time. So on Monday, we'll finish this and move on to the Cold War. We'll have slides. I'll put these slides up so you can download them and study them to your heart's content. Thank you very much.